10. One terrified grandmother. In Texas, a 90-year-old grandmother was caught on video desperately trying to protect her 21-year-old grandson from being arrested by a group of police officers. The bizarre incident happened in 2020. Footage shows the exact moment Ty Anders laid down on his front lawn as 3 Midland police officers pointed their firearms at him. And all because he failed to yield at a stop sign on a Saturday afternoon. The young man was clearly terrified. He was yelling at the police to please put their guns down, crying that he was scared, and yeah, you can't really blame him. He clearly wasn't armed, he was lying on the ground, and yet 3 police needed to put their guns in his face. In the middle of it all, his grandmother strolled up in a pink dress with her walking stick to try and get between the cops and her grandson. Ty was arrested and taken to jail, then later released on bond. The reason the cops had treated them so harshly was that he blew through a stop sign and then refused to pull over until he got to his grandmother's house. Officers say they pulled their guns out when he exited the vehicle and refused to cooperate. 9. Nashville shootout. A video from a Nashville police officer's dashboard camera caught the terrifying confrontation between himself and a woman as they opened fire on one another during a traffic stop gone wrong. Officer Josh Baker pulled over a woman named Nika Nicole Holbert at around 9:30 in the morning in March of 2021. She was driving a Chevrolet Camaro, a vehicle Josh recognized as belonging to a convicted drug dealer wanted on 6 warrants. The officer interrogated Nika, and through the interrogation she became uncooperative and hostile. He discovered drugs in her purse, and that was when he decided to put her in handcuffs. But as he attempted to get the handcuffs on her, things got violent. She didn't want to be arrested. She kept screaming that she hadn't done anything, and so the officer tased her. When he tried to get her into the handcuffs a second time, she pulled out a gun and fired. The officer was hit. He fired back, and Nika got into her car and slammed on the gas. She crashed her car less than a block away. According to the public affairs manager for the Nashville Metropolitan Police Department, a bullet struck Josh underneath his bulletproof vest. His shot was fatal, and Nika was dead by the time she got to the hospital. To make things even more bizarre, this all happened in the parking lot of a Dollar General. People were behind them just trying to get some good deals while bullets were flying over their heads. 8. A Molotov cocktail. At a traffic stop in April of 2021, a deranged motorist attacked an NYPD officer. It was Saturday morning in Brooklyn when the angry motorist threw a Molotov cocktail at the police officer who'd stopped him. It all started with a simple traffic stop just before 8 o'clock in the morning. One officer approached the driver's side door, and the driver threw what was described as a caustic liquid substance in the face of the cop. Then he drove away. Another officer tracked the vehicle down soon after and pulled up behind it. The man stopped the car and got out, then threw a lit Molotov cocktail at the cop car, but it was a flop. The vodka bottle bounced off the patrol car and shattered in the street with no damage done. The suspect took off again, crashing his own car. He had no way of escape and the police descended on him. Maybe the craziest part is that the guy had been driving around with a cup full of caustic liquid and a Molotov cocktail. Seems like a weird combination to have on hand. The officer who got splashed with the chemical had to be treated for his burns, while the attacker was taken to jail. 7. Cruelty to a paraplegic. On September 30th, 2021, police officers stopped a man named Clifford Owensby. According to the Dayton Police Department, the man was pulling away from a suspected drug house. When the cops learned his identity, they became aware of his felony past. He'd previously been charged with crimes related to drugs and weapons. Because of that, the officers wanted to bring a canine unit in to look for drugs inside the vehicle. But before the dogs could sniff around, Clifford had to get out of his car. This is where things got ugly. Clifford informed the officers that he could not technically step out of his car because he's a paraplegic. Clifford wasn't being difficult and said he would be happy to comply and get out if the officers could help him. Instead of being human about the situation, the police became agitated and dragged him out of the car by his arms and hair. Then they put his arms behind his back and dragged his limp body across the street. Obviously, the police were in the wrong here. You can't be dragging paraplegic people around on the pavement. At the same time, they did discover a bag of cash which contained $22,000 in the vehicle. It was discovered by the K9 unit, which police say means it was somewhere near illegal drugs. That doesn't excuse their behavior by any stretch of the imagination, but it's important to know the whole story. 6. A mix-up and a concussion. After a traumatizing traffic stop in 2019, teenager Roger Warner filed a lawsuit against the town of Laurel, Maryland. Roger was allegedly pulled over for speeding as part of an ordinary traffic stop. But that traffic stop ended with Roger in the hospital with a concussion and his face covered in bruises. He and his mother are now demanding justice for what they say was a mishandling of the situation on the part of the police. Roger claims Officer David Marvel found his license suspended. Roger told the officer that wasn't true and that there'd been a mix-up. The officer told Roger to drive straight home and figure out the issue. But Roger wanted the officer to understand that he wasn't doing anything wrong and that his suspension issue had already been fixed. It was this arguing that apparently riled up the police officer, who escalated things very quickly. Instead of driving to his house, Roger was pulled out of his vehicle, tossed on the ground, and then hit on his head over and over. 2 more officers even showed up and held him down on the ground. When Roger's mother arrived at the police station, her son was covered in blood and had suffered a concussion. Now they're hoping to get some justice for a situation that spiraled way out of control. 5. Murder by association. Tyler Kennedy was driving 90 miles per hour, 145 kilometers per hour, in his Ford F-150 on March 27, 2021. He crashed his truck into an SUV carrying a family of 5. The accident was horrific, resulting in the death of Michael Dermier, his daughter Georgia, and his fiancée Lauren. The only survivors were 2 young children, although one suffered serious brain trauma and will likely be disabled for the rest of her life. There's really nothing more tragic than half a family being ripped apart by a crazed motorist. But the worst part is that it should have been prevented. Hours earlier, the police had an incident with Tyler because he'd been smoking fentanyl in his vehicle. They discovered drug paraphernalia and pills in his trunk. They also knew Tyler as a criminal with a history of shoplifting, drug abuse, and traffic violations. Nye County deputies were called to the local park, where Tyler had allegedly threatened to shoot somebody. Yet despite this guy driving around high on fentanyl and threatening to kill people, the police let him go. One of the deputies was even caught on body cam footage, saying that was a huge waste of time. Well, it wouldn't have been a waste of time if Tyler had been arrested. The cops let him go because he was too much of a hassle to deal with, too much paperwork. And their failure to do something resulted in the deaths of 3 innocent people. 4. A deadly ambush. Deputies in Florida were ambushed back in August of 2021 by a man described as a violent career criminal. The incident began as a routine traffic stop. Police pulled over a vehicle that had 3 adults and an infant inside. As the officers were chatting with 2 of the passengers, they asked the 3rd to get out of the vehicle. Instead, he leaped into the back seat, snatched up a rifle, and opened fire. Officers ran for safety, with one of them taking a bullet in the leg. Things got real very quickly. The officers dug down, but the gunman was already on the move. Luckily for the police, his weapon jammed as he was hunting them down, sneaking behind their own patrol vehicle. He used the butt of his rifle to smash one deputy in the face, and this act of brutalism allowed the deputies to open fire. From start to finish, about 60 seconds elapsed. According to the investigators, that was enough time for 61 shots to be fired. The suspect, later identified as Paris Wilder, was dead at the scene. His rap sheet was enormous, including charges of armed robbery, battery of a law enforcement officer, and even attempted murder. He was out on bond at the time of the ambush and had 2 active warrants. 3. A series of unfortunate events. In December of 2012, a trip to the convenience store ended in tragedy, and 2 people were killed when a routine traffic stop went totally off the rails. Ida Murphy was walking from her home on Northampton Street to the market to get some juice. She was 54 years old. As Ida was walking to the store, she got tangled up in a shootout. Police had pulled over a man they suspected was drinking and driving. There was a confrontation, and one of the cops fired his weapon. The drunk driver hit the gas of his SUV and crashed into some light poles. One of those light poles toppled over and fell right onto Ida Murphy's head. Her skull was crushed, and she was killed instantly. It was a total fluke that this happened to Ida. She was really at the worst possible spot at the worst possible time. Had she left 30 seconds earlier, she would have been past the light pole and maybe still alive today. It was just one of those unforeseeable freak accidents, and it left the community and Ida's family devastated. 2. Capital murder of a cop. A veteran cop was killed in June of 2021 after he got run over by a pair of suspects fleeing a traffic stop. His name was Kevin Apple, on the force for 23 years. He was making a routine traffic stop in Arkansas when the vehicle he approached rammed into him, then dragged him up the road. It was vehicular manslaughter, every officer's worst nightmare who's ever had to pull somebody over. Apple and another officer named Brian Stamps had been responding to a call about a blue Jeep that had just committed property crime. They spotted the vehicle with that description at a convenience store and gas station and used their squad car to box it in. They assumed the Jeep was stuck, and so Kevin Apple approached the driver. It was the moment the driver was waiting for. He hit the gas, ran over Kevin, and plowed through his squad car. As the Jeep peeled away, Officer Stamps opened fire. As you can imagine, the Arkansas police were not about to let this kind of thing slide. They tracked the killers down almost instantly. They soon had Shauna Ray Cash and Elijah Anna DeLoza Sr. in custody and charged with capital murder. Elijah was only 18 years old, Shauna only 22. They're both almost definitely going to be in jail for the rest of their life. Not only because they committed capital murder, but because they ran over and killed a cop in an extremely horrific and merciless way. 1. Tragedy in Maryland. Norali Paz Chavez died after crashing into a fence post and hitting a tree following a routine traffic stop in Maryland. It happened at 1:30 in the morning on a Saturday, February 26, 2022. Montgomery County Police say an officer saw her car commit a traffic violation, and so they tried to pull her over. Instead of complying, Paz Chavez drove away. She tried to outrun the police, but only got about 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers. She lost control of her vehicle and crashed, and was pronounced dead at the scene. It's tragic that such a young woman, only 26 years old, passed away under such violent circumstances, and her family just doesn't understand how it happened. Her mother, Wanda, is devastated by the accident, saying her daughter was her reason for living. Wanda also said in an interview that she just doesn't get why her daughter would drive away rather than pulling over. Even the police don't know exactly why she tried to drive away, but believe she may have been under the influence of alcohol. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have police point their guns at you or be in the car with a drunk driver? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.